Alright, let's talk about Split Fiction, the game that refuses to stick to just one style. 1 minute, you're pulling off precise platforming moves, and the next, you're doing something so wild you start questioning what kind of game you're even playing. Every chapter throws a brand new ability at you, and let me tell you, some of them are absolute game changers. But not all abilities are created equal. Some are cool, some are okay, and a few, oh, they're the kind of mechanics that make you want to replay levels just to mess around with them again. So today, we're ranking the best abilities in Split Fiction, the ones that make you feel unstoppable, the ones that make every jump, dash, and attack 10 times more satisfying. Which ability is the king of them all? Let's break it down. I'm quickly moving on to the video. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. Alright, so let's talk about shapeshifting in Split Fiction, because on paper, it sounds like the ultimate power trip, right? Mio and Zoe can transform into all these different creatures, and at first you're thinking, oh, this is going to be amazing. But then, reality kicks in. Some of these forms, absolute game changers. Others? Well, let's just say they feel like that one-side quest you regret starting. Zoe's fairy form? Easily the most fun. You're zipping around, dodging obstacles, reaching places that would otherwise take way too long to get to. It makes exploration feel smooth, almost effortless. But then you switch to Mio's giant monkey form, expecting some King Kong level destruction, only to realize it's slow, clunky, and kind of a chore. Sure, smashing things is fun, but when you're stuck moving at the speed of a lazy Sunday stroll, the excitement wears off fast. And then there's Zoe's plant creature. At first you think, okay, this could be cool, nature powers and all that. And yeah, sometimes it is. There are a few creative puzzles where you stretch out vines or sneak through tight spots. But more often than not, it just feels like a glorified key. Like the game is saying, oh, you can't go through this door? Better turn into a weird plant thing and wiggle through this conveniently placed gap. It's less about freedom and more about following instructions, which, let's be honest, isn't the best feeling in a game that promises wild, shape-shifting chaos. Alright, let's talk about some of the best abilities in Split Fiction, specifically Mio's Gravity Sword and Zoe's Whip. These two moves completely change the way you navigate the game, and while they have their differences, they both bring a lot of personality to the table. Mio's Gravity Sword? Absolute game changer. You're not just swinging a sword, you're bending gravity itself. This means lightning-fast movement, mid-air redirections, and some of the slickest platforming moments in the game. It feels good to use, like the game is constantly rewarding you for mastering it. Then there's Zoe's Whip, and while it might not be as flashy, it's got its own charm. Instead of speed, the whip gives you control. You're swinging across gaps, grabbing onto ledges, and pulling objects to solve puzzles. It slows things down compared to Mio's high-energy movement, but in return, you get more deliberate, thoughtful exploration. The whip forces you to engage with the environment in a different way, and that's what makes it stand out. Now, are they perfectly balanced? Not exactly. Mio's Gravity Sword is snappier, more immediate, and honestly, just more fun to use moment to moment. Zoe's Whip can feel a little slower by comparison, but that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, that contrast is what makes this level so cool. You're constantly switching between two playstyles, one about speed, the other about precision, and that variety keeps things fresh. They might not be the most complex abilities in the game, but for an early introduction to Split Fiction's mechanics, they absolutely do their job. So let's talk about one of the absolute best abilities in Split Fiction, the color-coded shooting powers from Chapter 4. Up until this point, Mio and Zoe usually have totally different skills, which makes for some awesome teamwork moments. But here, they finally get almost identical abilities, and it changes everything. Suddenly, it's less about, you do this while I do that, and more about perfect synchronization. It's like playing a rhythm game with a shooter twist, where one mistimed shot can throw everything off. Now, you'd think shooting matching colored targets and chucking grenades at walls would get old fast, but the level design here is so good that it keeps things fresh. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, the game throws a new twist at you. Moving targets, timed puzzles, obstacles that force you to swap roles on the fly. And when you're in the middle of a tricky section, shouting at your partner to shoot now, no, not now, now. It's chaotic in the best way possible, but here's the real reason this ability stands out. It forces communication like no other. By the time you reach the final stretch, you're practically reading each other's minds. That moment when you both hit your targets in perfect sync. It feels incredible. It's the kind of co-op experience that Hazelight does best, and honestly, I wish more games had mechanics like this. Chapter 7 of Split Fiction is where things really start to shine. Literally. By this point, Mio and Zoe have unlocked some of their most impressive spirit powers, and Hazelight isn't holding back on making you use them creatively. Mio's light spirit ability? It's all about summoning platforms out of thin air, which sounds simple at first, until you realize just how precise and strategic you have to be. Meanwhile, Zoe's power takes things up a notch, letting her manipulate the environment in ways that feel straight up magical. What makes these abilities so satisfying isn't just their mechanics, it's how the game forces you to think. You're not just placing platforms randomly, you're timing jumps, syncing movements, and using the world around you to pull off insane sequences that feel like they belong in a highlight reel. And when you finally nail that perfect combo, Mio setting up a path while Zoe bends the environment to fit, it's chef's kiss perfection. The game doesn't just give you cool powers, it makes you earn those epic moments. And let's talk about the visuals, the way light bends and shapes itself around Mio's platforms, the way Zoe's energy ripples through the world. It's gorgeous. Every puzzle feels like a living, breathing set piece designed to make you stop and appreciate just how much thought went into these mechanics. By the time you hit the final moments of Chapter 7, you're not just playing the game, you're mastering it, and trust me, it feels amazing. Alright, let's talk about some of the absolute best abilities in Split Fiction, because this game throws some wild mechanics at you, and mastering them is half the fun. By the time you hit the final level, the whole ability system gets flipped on its head. But let's rewind a bit and appreciate some of the standout powers that make the journey so satisfying. One of my personal favorites has to be Phase Shift. It starts off simple, letting you flicker between two versions of the level, but as the game progresses, it gets ridiculous. By mid-game, you're dodging attacks by phasing at just the right time, platforming across gaps that don't even exist in one reality, and pulling off insane split-second swaps. It's that kind of ability that makes you feel like a genius when you nail it. And then there's Echo Step, which is basically a teleport, but with a twist. You leave behind a temporary clone that mimics your last few actions. Sounds cool? It is. You can use it to bait enemies, activate switches in quick succession, or even outmaneuver obstacles by having your past self do the heavy lifting. It's one of those mechanics that feels like a gimmick at first, but turns into an absolute game changer once you get the hang of it. Oh man, if we're talking about the best abilities in Split Fiction, then we have to talk about the Dragon Twins in Chapter 5. This level is an absolute roller coaster from start to finish. At first, you're just working with two little dragon eggs, basically puzzle-solving props. Cute? Sure. Exciting? Not really. But the second those eggs crack open, the game flips the switch. One dragon can glide, the other can climb, and suddenly, you're tackling platforming sections in a way that just clicks. And the best part? These abilities don't just stay the same. As the dragons grow, they get new tricks, and the level design evolves with them. First, you get the acid projectile, which lets you take down enemies from a distance. Then, you unlock the rolling ability, turning one of your dragons into a living, breathing, wrecking ball. The game just keeps stacking these mechanics in a way that feels so natural, so satisfying, that by the time you hit the final stretch of the level, you're pulling off insane combos without even thinking. By the end, your dragons are fully grown, and you feel like an absolute pro. Platforming? Nailed it. Combat? A breeze. The way the game paces these upgrades is just chef's kiss. It's one of those rare moments where a game doesn't just give you cool abilities. It makes you earn them, learn them, and then absolutely own them. If you haven't played Chapter 5 yet, trust me, you're in for a ride. Morph Balls in Split Fiction is the kind of ability that just makes you smile. It's simple. Roll around, bounce off walls, and squeeze through tight spaces. But it feels so good. Chapter 6 takes this concept and runs with it, designing an entire level around the pure joy of movement. And the best part? It never gets old. The physics feel buttery smooth, and every turn, jump, and acceleration just clicks. It's the kind of platforming that reminds you why movement itself can be fun in a game. But what really makes this ability shine is how it interacts with Mio's hacking and Zoe's magnet. Instead of just rolling from point A to B, you're using your tools to manipulate the environment in creative ways. Mio can shut down barriers or trigger moving platforms mid-roll, while Zoe can use her magnet to slingshot across gaps or stick to metallic surfaces. It's this kind of synergy that Split Fiction nails. Earlier in the game, you had shapeshifting, which was cool, but you could tell the devs were holding back a little. With morph balls, they go all in, and the level design is all the better for it. This is exactly what makes Split Fiction so special. It doesn't just give you abilities, it gives you depth. Morph balls could have been a gimmick, but instead, it's a late-game mechanic that keeps evolving, making you think and adapt in ways you wouldn't expect. It's fast, it's fluid, and most importantly, it's fun. If we're talking best abilities in the game, this one's definitely rolling to the top of the list. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.